What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and we're back for the first episode of BKT UK in 2021. I'm joined as ever by Aidan McConaughey and Cammy Anderson as we take a look back at the Nets' 5-5 start to the new season. Now, of course, we won't be going into each game individually, so we've decided to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly from the season so far. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK2UK Pod, and subscribe to us on YouTube by searching UK Nets Fans and clicking subscribe. All of our episodes will be available to watch, and we really appreciate your support over there. We've also got a Teespring store where you can buy tees, hoodies, other bits and bobs to rep the Nets colours and support what we're doing here at UK Nets Fans. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Starting with, I thought, to start, it's a new year. We're kind of still feeling a little bit festive, even though Christmas has come and gone. But I thought we'd go in reverse order. So instead of the good, the bad, and the ugly, let's save the good for a little while. But we're going to start with the ugly, unfortunately. And that is the news that on the match against Charlotte, we actually suffered 2 losses that night. So we lost the game, and we also lost Spencer Dinwiddie to a partially torn ACL on his right knee. After a pretty inconspicuous drive, Spencer went down, and it's looking certain that we won't see him again until next year now. At the time of recording, he's already had successful surgery and started his rehab. But yeah, gents, thanks for joining me again today. What do you guys think this means for the Nets for the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's devastating, to be honest with you. I mean, personally, I kind of thought there was something bad that happened as soon as I saw him go down. It's just, you kind of see with basketball players, the way they go down, they almost look confused. They're like, oh, that didn't feel right. And I could hear Sarah Kustok speaking. You could say, oh, you don't want to think the worst with these things, but that didn't look good. And obviously with her being a basketball player, you could kind of tell straight away that she knew that it didn't look good. In terms of, for the Nets, it doesn't make things easier. We pride ourselves in our depth. And a huge part of that depth is obviously having a point guard as a sixth man that could easily start on the majority of the teams in the league. I know he's kind of been starting, but I feel that just the way things have been going with Karras recently, I think probably Spencer was going to get back to that six-man role, and he would have excelled as he usually does. It's a real shame. Like, I was kind of hoping for that news that was coming through with regards to if they were going to go for the disabled player option. That was, for me, the telling point as to how severe they thought this would be. Obviously, when you get surgery, it's going to be a long time. But you have seen players in the past that have came back and maybe came back for that kind of end of season in the playoff times, which I was hoping for, but they clearly thought that it wasn't viable because it looks like they're going to be getting that disabled player option. He's going to come back. I mean, you know what Spencer's like. He's defied odds like his entire career, and I'm sure he'll get back to what he was doing beforehand. Will it be on the Nets? I don't know. Obviously, by the time he comes back, it could be questionable if he will be a Nets player. But I know that I'll certainly follow his career because what Spencer's done for this team, especially during this rebuild, has been incredible, and he's an absolute asset to have. So I do hope he will be on the Nets by the time he gets back from his injury, but there's a chance that he might not be, unfortunately.
I mean, as Aidan says, devastating news, and I think it's quite sad to think that could have potentially been the way Spence's career in Brooklyn finished. Obviously, I think it's a player option he's got at the end of the season, and there were quite a lot of rumours about whether he'd take it or whether he'd kind of try himself. And obviously, we know what Spence is like, going on Twitter and stuff, and he was kind of doing all the stuff with like Bitcoin and kind of all those cryptocurrencies with regards to his contract. And it kind of makes me wonder, now he's had this injury, will this make him maybe reflect on things and go, right, I'll take the player option, even though I could probably get more. Maybe the injury might concern him. Maybe folk won't touch him if he's been injured, but at least he knows he's got a job, at least if he takes that player option. But I mean, this season, he wasn't exactly great. I mean, I know we, in the Discord chat and stuff, none of us were exactly impressed with him. The pre-season games, he wasn't up to much, and he played 3 games for us in the regular season before obviously getting injured. And yeah, I mean, in terms of points and assists and rebounds, like your kind of normal stat line, nothing to really shout home about. But I think it's a bit odd because although he was playing he was now a starter rather than the sixth man, we have kind of missed him since his injury, and that's weird considering he wasn't actually up to much, and it wasn't something that I expected us to miss as much as we have done. But I think, as Aidan says, with the way Karras has played lately, he's bound to be the kind of starter in no time, really. But yeah, as Aidan says, and as I've said, really disappointing news, and all the best to Spencer, who, has done a lot for this team in the past few years.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think, like you said, Aidan, it's just they've filed for a disabled player exception, which means they can sign an expiring player for half of Spencer's salary. But we would have to open up an extra roster spot, which I think is a bit weird. Like, I don't really understand player exceptions very much anyway. But the fact that you've lost a player, but you still have to open up a roster spot, it just seems a bit weird to me.
It's weird.
But yeah, I think he was averaging something like 6 points for the 3 games that he played or something, which, we saw Spencer last year primarily as our first option when Karras and Kyrie were out. So seeing him not scoring the lion's share of the points is really, really strange. But yeah, I guess all we can say is, best of luck to Spencer. And, as you say, he's battled lots and lots of things throughout his career, and it is a career year, and he is representing himself now. So, maybe fingers crossed that he'll get one of those Joe Harris contracts back when he does come to re-sign, just sort of there's a little bit more generous, just to kind of taking into account the years of service he's had to this team, because as you say, he's been absolutely phenomenal. So that's the ugly out of the way. We're going to get back to talk to the bad. Obviously, this is spanning 10 games. So a lot of this, could have happened a couple of weeks ago. And a lot of these things we're going to talk has basically just affected our season so far. But the first thing I wanted to discuss, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about this, is the Nets' no defense, the streaky defense. It seems to me that the Nets either lead from the first quarter or they're down big from the first quarter. And whatever the score is at the end of that first quarter, that's pretty much indicative of what happens at the final score. What stuff have you guys noticed about the Nets on defense that has been concerning you?
I mean, for the most part, it's been non-existent, but at the same time, I was kind of looking at some of the numbers, and we've actually got the third best defense rating in the league.
It's crazy.
So I mean, it's really confusing considering the amount of games where, as you say, Matt, the games are pretty much done in the first quarter, and obviously it's great on the nights we win, but to be staying up into the early hours here in the UK, knowing that we're already beaten by the end of the first quarter and there's still another 3 quarters to go, it certainly doesn't make the rest of the game enjoyable, knowing that we're not going to get anywhere from it. But kind of that said, I think against the Grizzlies, which was played last night, obviously we're recording on the Saturday, I think we kind of turned a corner in this regard. We obviously fell quite heavily behind. The deficit at one point was as much as 22. Yet we managed to actually come back, take the lead, albeit only temporarily, and then we did lose out by 5 points. And then due to some very poor decision-making from Steve Nash, obviously, I think we've spoken quite a lot about maybe him being a bit of a rookie, not really known too much. And I think this was perhaps the most glaring error he's made yet, and that was keeping Jarrett Allen on the bench for as long as he did. And then we had a timeout as well. Why didn't he call the timeout and bring Jarrett Allen in? We were on a run where I don't think we scored about 3.5 minutes. And I mean, the game was there for the taking. We could have won it, but just due to us having DeAndre Jordan, who I think has been one of the most notably poor defensive players, maybe his stat line says otherwise, but I can't help but think he could do so much more if he just applied himself a bit. There's so many games where a smaller guy will get anywhere close to him. He just doesn't even bother to contest it. And he's just not got that kind of same energy as Jarrett Allen. We've seen Jarrett Allen go coast to coast sometimes. He gets a rebound, passes it out, and then he's at the other end dunking at home. And DeAndre Jordan just doesn't have that to his game. And yeah, it's real disappointing. And in terms of some other numbers I noticed, we're 27th in terms of opponents' rebounds per game, which obviously isn't very ideal. And
terrible.
Another thing, far too many turnovers. We're averaging about 14 a game, which ranks us 10th in the league. But I just can't help but feel when the games we've lost, most of these games have us making 20 or around that area of turnovers, and it's no real surprise. And the opposition are punishing us almost every time for this as well. So yeah, it's been a strange one because there's been nights where we have played defensively well. You kind of think back to the first two games where we blew out Golden State and Boston, but then we handed a win to the Wizards, who are absolutely terrible. Two of the Grizzlies' 3 wins have come from us, and yeah, it's just very disappointing.
Yeah, I think you summed it up by calling it frustrating, Cammy. I mean, I'm finding just when I am staying up for games at night, it's like you're a wee bit more tired, you get more agitated, and when you see that they're not putting in the full effort defensively, it's just frustrating. I mean, some of the games, especially this week, I've just found that you've just been expecting that teams are going to score every time they go down the court because the effort's not there. And I mean, I hate to single out specific players with it being a team sport, but I think Cammy was spot on. DeAndre Jordan, I can't understand how that guy has went from being on all defensive teams, I think 3 times in his career, 2 or 3 times in his career, to what he is now. And I've been thinking about it recently, and I mean, I was quite positive about DeAndre to start the season. I think you were as well, Matt. You were saying that you're kind of higher on him than most guys, and I was the same. But I mean, his life is nice. You've got to think he's earning £10 million a year, $10 million, sorry. He gets to live in the best city in the world, and he gets to spend time with 2 of his best friends. But my question is, does he actually want to win a ring? Does he want to win a ring before he retires? Or is he quite happy with the way things are going? Because I look at guys like Jeff Green at the moment, and I think Jeff Green looks like he wants to win a ring. And then I look at guys like DeAndre, and I think, is he just happy with the situations he's in right now? Because he's certainly not putting in the effort that he was in the last, say, 5 years or so, maybe like kind of in 5 years past, sorry. I just wonder if, like, obviously the situation he was in with the Clippers, situation he was in with the Knicks and Dallas, he's been messed around quite a lot. And I think he is probably too good to be messed around like that as a player. I mean, he is a good player, but the effort just isn't there. And another thing, I feel sorry for going in DeAndre like solo, but see the thing with the Philly game the other day when Dwight Howard was shoving around Jarrett Allen. And I go back to that game when Jared Dudley went absolutely mental. He went after Ben Simmons. After that happened, DeAndre Jordan came in. He was laughing and joking with Dwight Howard, and I'm thinking, I don't want that from my vets at all. I want my vets to go after players like that to defend your younger guys. And it just makes me think. I think he's just comfortable with the situation at the moment, and we really need vets out there that can just give 110%, and they want to get that ring before they retire.
Yeah, I think that's a wicked point. But definitely with the lack of defense, I hate to say it's a lack of effort, but it's just because we're not there every day and we don't really know what else it could be. Visually, that's what it looks like, and that's kind of the only thing that we can kind of say it's going to be. But there's kind of 2 things. He either just is so slow on the uptake that he just doesn't know what's happening until after it's happened, or he's got a bit of TLC from last year where he'll just get 4 fouls in as many minutes. And all of a sudden he's got to go off anyway. So it's a really, really strange one. But yeah, hopefully it's not. Yeah, I think him being comfortable is probably a really, really good shout as well. Like you say, he's got $10 million coming in this year. He's with his mates. He's in Brooklyn. But yeah, maybe he just does need to. Maybe he's taken a slow waltz into the season, and it'll kind of ramp up as more we go on. But I won't hold my breath. So the next bad that I want to talk about is our record. Obviously 5-5 wasn't exactly what we thought would happen. Aidan said we'd be going 9-1 in the first 10 games, and Cammy and I both said I think that we go 8-2. But we're at 500. Do you think with so many other teams, other championship caliber teams having a shaky start as well, is this something to get worried about? It's all small sample size and all that kind of stuff.
No, I mean, it's still early. I mean, obviously it's a shortened season, but we are still only 10 games in. And yeah, you just need to look around the league to know that this is no ordinary season. I'd say it's even more unordinary than last year with the bubble and things like that. Like, just the way the Knicks are playing, it's like, why are they doing so well? It's just, it shouldn't be happening. But no, it's I don't think it's something to worry about. I mean, in terms of the record, it could have been much better. Let's be honest. But it could have been so much worse with the situation we were handed this week. And I just think to go 2-2 in the last 4 games with wins against Utah and the 76ers, we can't complain too much. But we would have turned our noses up, as we did. We turned our noses up to say that the Nets would have a worse record than, say, losing 1 or 2 games. And rightly so. I mean, a couple of games to start the season, we shouldn't have lost to teams like the Wizards. I just think, despite the situation, I know we're still finding our feet with the rotations and stuff. We shouldn't be losing games like that. And I know, obviously, we're going down to Kyrie and KD missing those shots late on. That's going to happen. And we need to stop realising that we have to rely on them balling out every single game to get the win. But games like that, we should not be dropping early on. And it's things like the defence that we need to really kind of keep an eye on, because if that's going to stop us from winning certain games, we can forget about it when it comes to the playoffs, because every game is a game of plays, and you need to be so strong in every possession. And I think, if we were stronger in defensively in certain games, I think our record would probably be about, say, 7-3 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think things certainly could have been a lot better, but as Aidan says, it's still too early to get too worried. I mean, when you consider some of the stuff I've kind of had to deal with, maybe not as bad as some other teams, but let's not count out the fact that we've had to do without KD and Kyrie on several games. We've lost Spencer, as we've already spoken about, and there's a lot of kind of teething problems we have to face, obviously, in Dash, as we've said, rookie coach in his first year as a head coach, and there's a lot that's kind of got to click, and in some games we've seen that, and in other games we just haven't. And I mean, I think that's only natural kind of this early on in things, but I mean, the defeats against the Wizards and the Grizzlies, very disappointing. Teams that we really should be beating, with all due respect to them, especially we should have beaten the Grizzlies last night because they were without Ja Morant, and yeah, we should have beaten them quite easily. And when we kind of got that momentum, having made the comeback, we really should have just seen that out and won it, but it just didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, 5-5, it's not the worst. We're still actually in the playoffs. If the season was 10 today, I think we're the 8th seed, which, I mean, isn't great, but we'd still be in the playoffs, and I think we'd still take that anyway, considering how far we've come. But at the end of the day, that's not what we want. We want to kind of be up there challenging first or second seed and being a real kind of force. But yeah, I think give it a few more weeks before we can maybe start panicking. We'll see how things pan out. But yeah, certainly a lot to be desired. But then there's also been some positives as well, which we'll get on to.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's been so much weirdness going on this season. I think more than any other season. Like, there's, teams losing by 1 billion, teams being up by 30 and going on to losing double digits, both those teams being the Clippers. But like, it's just, it just seems to be, I think there's so much weirdness going on around the league. I think it's diluted the panic that Nets fans have had. So I think that's quite a nice situation to be in. But yeah, fingers crossed, like the ship rights itself before too long. I've got this one down in the bad category, but we might talk about him in the good category. I've got it down as free Bruce Brown. So Bruce Brown, I don't know what he did to whoever it was in the Nets, but it took him far too long to get on the court. I've loved him since he has come on, and I think he's electric. What do you guys make of him, taking till, what was it, the fourth game in the season for him to get any meaningful minutes?
I mean, it was hugely surprising that we never had Brown on. Obviously, he came in and was described as a barnacle on defense, and I think he described himself as a dog. And yeah, it's like, why aren't you playing this guy? It was, our defense has been questionable throughout the season, and this is a guy who's known for his defense. He's not really known for his offensive output, but when it comes to the defense, that's his bread and butter. Get him on the court. He could have, I'm not saying he's some superhero and some superstar, far from it, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened had we had Brown on in some of those games when we were just hemorrhaging points. I mean, he's maybe not the tallest, but he seems to get plenty of rebounds, and I mean, he's chipped in with some points, and that's ultimately not his main thing. And yeah, I think he could potentially be quite a key play for us, kind of, especially in crunch games, once we kind of sort some things out. But glad to finally see him get some action on the court recently, and hopefully gets a wee bit more as well.
Yeah, I think you summed it up, Matt. what did he do? I mean, you've just got to wonder what was going on in those practices. You've got to think he must have been absolutely awful to not get in ahead of some of the players that were getting minutes early on. It's weird. I mean, how does a guy go from not getting any minutes at all to then being a starter? I just don't understand it. It was like Rodion's Kurucs. I think it was a few years ago. Everyone was dying to see him, and then eventually gets minutes as a starter. It's weird, and I just think it is again down to the fact that Nash is a rookie coach and he's accepting in himself that he is making mistakes, which is good because you get such stubborn coaches which are so hesitant to make changes just because it will make them look like they've made a incorrect decision in the past. And I think that's what's happened here. I mean, there was for a while I was thinking, why the hell did we even bother trading for Bruce Brown? Because I mean, I know Jana Musa wasn't up for much, but why go to the effort of filling in that paperwork and stuff like that to get a player that's not even going to see any minutes? But yeah, in terms, you're right, it is a positive in a way because I've enjoyed watching him play. I think he looks better on the offensive end than people were giving him credit for. He can get to the rim. I think he's hit a couple of threes. There was one last night where he had a good look and his shot looked good, but it didn't fall late on. But I like the fact that he's got the confidence to do that. And it will come eventually, obviously, with the elite shooting coaches that we've got in the team. He just looks like a guy that wants to fight for every single minute he can get on the court, which I really like. And I love that attitude because there is a complacency around certain players in the team. And I think you want to have a couple of those young guys that just have that desire and they want to be great and they want to be starters. And it's a good attitude to have because it does raise the caliber of play around you. And I think, he's an asset to have on the defensive end. I thought he was an absolute delight to watch against Utah, the way he dealt with Donovan Mitchell. I mean, Donovan Mitchell's going to go off in any night, but he was causing him a lot of trouble. And I think, I wouldn't surprise me if he's going to stay in the rotation for the rest of the year.
Yeah, nice. I think it's like it speaks to his maturity as well for a young player to be like, look, I'm not here to like score points. I'm here just to be a pain in the ass on defense and just run around, which is awesome. And I'm trying to think when we had such like a pure athlete as well. Like it seems like he's quite unique in a Nets uniform. We haven't had that, just someone who's an elite athlete running around, because I think he played, like, he was big into American football as well. I'm not sure at what level, but obviously he chose basketball. Thank goodness for us. But like, yeah, he's just an absolute physical specimen, which is really, really good, I think. So yeah, hopefully more of that to come from Bruce Brown. Another one on the bad list is KD being forced to sit. Now, we first heard the news from Shams Charania from The Athletic, who tweeted, Nets star Kevin Durant is expected to require 7 days of quarantine before returning to action due to contact tracing exposure to COVID-19, sources tell The Athletic. He then followed up by saying Kevin Durant's facing a 7-day quarantine under league protocols because of exposure to a positive COVID-19 case, sources tell ESPN. He had the coronavirus in May, continues to register antibodies, and has tested negative in multiple recent tests. He'd miss 4 games next week. I guess, like, obviously you want to be super, super cautious as someone who literally has COVID at the moment. This is my flu game, this podcast. But like, it's weird to see that you can get sidelined for a week, even though you test negative. But I think in our game versus the Sixers, Seth Curry tested positive during the game, and that game continued. It seems like a weird double standard. It's great in our case that they're being so cautious with KD, but what do you guys make of, KD testing negative but still getting locked down for a week?
Yeah, I think you summed it up a couple of weeks ago in the predictions pod, Matt, when you said that you think an entire team is going to get shut down at some point, and it's looking that way. I mean, with large amounts of players having to self-isolate. I mean, don't get me wrong, the NBA is advised by some of the top doctors, scientists in the world, like some of the best. But I'm personally still kind of scratching my head at this one. I've tried to figure it out, tried to look into it. And I just don't understand how someone who can test negative multiple times after being told to self-isolate and also, as you mentioned, continuing to produce the antibodies, can be told that he can't play over certain players that have been, I don't know, like it's so confusing for me, just because I think that they're not kind of showing their entire information as to what falls in the category of having to self-isolate, how they're getting their information through from who they're in contact with, things like that. But I mean, fair enough. I mean, if that's the protocol, then you're right. They're just being cautious. The thing that's confusing me the most, though, is when they came out and said that, oh, they've changed it. So he was going to have to self-isolate until Tuesday, I think it was, so Tuesday next week. But now they're saying that he can come back early tomorrow if he continues to test negative. And I just think, what's the difference between tomorrow and, say, a couple of days ago when we were due to play again? Because at the end of the day, he's still been testing negative for it. And you have to assume that he's been isolated from that person that tested negative from that time, because it'd be stupid otherwise to be near them, because we still don't know the chances of testing positive again. We still don't know like that information. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm just a biased fan at the end of the day. So that's just my opinion. I want him to play as many games as possible. But yeah, I'm still scratching my head as to why he had to sit out for these ones.
Yeah, I mean, so am I. I think, as you say, it's massively confusing. I think the protocol isn't really all that easy to understand. Lots of kind of changes and stuff. And I mean, Steve Nash, like in the game it was announced, he was asked by those on Yes kind of what the situation was, and he wasn't even really that sure. I mean, how can you be having protocols like this and the head coaches don't know whether that's on the nets or whether that's on the league itself? I'm not entirely sure, but just the amount of confusion there is. And I mean, the thing that strikes me is KD's already had COVID, and as Aidan rightly says, we don't know if you can get it again, test positive again or whatever. But yeah, to be tested negative so many times and showing you've still got the antibodies, it doesn't really add up to me yet. As Aidan pointed out as well, Seth Curry, 2 minutes into the game, the positive test result returned. And granted, the league and the Sixers and whatnot and the Nets all done brilliant to handle that situation. I believe there was a tweet that went out saying Curry was out the arena within about 2 or 3 minutes of the positive test going back. So they're certainly not mucking around and taking a lot of caution. But I mean, a bit more kind of clarity is certainly going to be needed, because let's be honest, KD's not the only person who's had COVID in the league. He's not going to be the last, unfortunately. And there needs to kind of be a little bit more information on this, or a bit more wiggle room, because I think the NBA have perhaps realised off the back of KD testing so negative, and the kind of, not negative press, but the kind of press it has had, it's maybe made them think, right, if they can keep testing negative, why are we keeping them out for an extra 3, 4, 5 days or whatever? Like, yeah, for me, if you can test negative multiple times in multiple days and negative on the day of the game, that's what it should be. I mean, these players are getting tested, maybe once, twice daily. There's not going to be many people more aware of what their situation is than these basketball players. And I mean, that goes for all sports people. We've seen lots of cases kind of in the Premier League and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're probably one of the safest people in the world at the moment as a basketballer, given the amount of testing you're getting. And yeah, as Aidan says, you want to see your stars play as many games, and just hopefully KD does manage to get back for the game against his former employers, the Thunder, if not the following game, because he's already missed a few. So yeah, hopefully have him back soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, going from Steve Nash being confused about the COVID protocols to Steve Nash being confused about something else, which we're all a little bit confused about. But this is Kyrie Irving missing games for personal reasons. Ahead of the long-awaited debut of the Classic Edition jersey against the team with the best record in the league on national TV, Kyrie said that he wasn't going to play, citing personal reasons. Obviously, Twitter being Twitter, rumors going around that it was due to what happened in the US Capitol recently. Is it okay that he seemingly hasn't disclosed much to Steve Nash, do you think? And he's just kind of said, oh, it's personal and I'll chat to you when I chat to you.
I mean, I think it's a tough one, because I think as an employee, you'd want your employees to tell you this. It's very vague. As you say, lots of rumours. There was obviously that rumour about kind of what happened at the Capitol, and then there was the rumour that was maybe a child somewhere, and then there was rumours of someone who'd maybe died. And yeah, it's just a bit weird. There were a few players who missed out on that night, and I think that kind of gave some weight to the theory that it was maybe to do with the capital and all of that kind of thing. I know Richard Jefferson was supposed to appear on Yes, and he also didn't go on for personal reasons, and we're yet to kind of understand why he wasn't there. But yeah, Kyrie, obviously, we know how mysterious he is as a person, and you don't want to knock him, but it really doesn't paint him in good light for the way he's kind of dealt with it. I can understand you're wanting to maybe keep things personal and give it a few days, but I mean, the fact that I think Nash was only told just kind of shortly, kind of as the teams were really arriving at the arena, it wasn't like he was told in the morning, right, he's not playing tonight. It all seemed to happen quite quickly, just an hour or so before the game, and it was Kyrie's out for personal reasons. And of course, things can happen in an instant, but yeah, it's a bit weird. I did see that Carlos Levert had said that Kyrie had been in touch with the team via text. Whether he disclosed why he was missing, I'm not really sure, but yeah, you want to hope that it's nothing too serious, and hopefully we also see him back on the court alongside KD as well, just quickly, or sooner rather than later, should I say.
Yeah, I mean, going back to kind of, it's like, as a fan, like a fan of the Nets, you see something like that come out, especially after what's been happening with KD, and you're just like, oh, come on, like what's going on here? But yeah, I mean, you've just got to sit back and look at what's happening. I think at the end of the day, I think it was down to what happened at the Capitol, and I think I can't remember who put it out. It was a reporter, a reliable one anyway, that said he's unhappy with what's happening in America at the moment, and that's fair enough to me. I mean, Kyrie prides himself on a guy who fights for things that he believes in. And if his reasons for sitting out were due to the fact that he's still trying to process things that are happening, he's not in the right mental frame of mind, then that's absolutely fair enough. I mean, but what Cammy said, I mean, there's ways to go about it with your employers. I mean, you know what Steve Nash is like. He's still a new coach, and he probably could have said something a bit better than going on. I don't know, I've texted him, but he's not got back to me yet. I mean, you just go, look, oh, he's not playing tonight. More will be discussed when we've got the information or something like that. Just be a wee bit more savvy about it with the media, because they had an absolute field day with like going like, oh, well, the coach doesn't know, Kyrie's just decided he doesn't want to play. But I mean, there needs to be an increased normalization, of the caring for players' well-beings in the NBA, like altogether. I mean, you've got to think, like, compared to any other sport, the intensity of this game, how often they play, it's crazy, and they are human at the end of the day. And if someone's not in the right frame of mind, then they shouldn't be forced to do something that they're uncomfortable with doing, regardless of if it's their work or not. So yeah, I mean, I respect Kyrie for taking time out if that's the case, but yeah, you can go about it slightly better if that was the case. But it was a quick thing, and I mean, I don't think he can be told off for deciding in a time frame if it was half an hour before the game or 2 days before the game that decided he didn't want to play. I mean, if he didn't feel like he was in the right frame of mind to play, then that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think whatever we're going to say about Steve Nash being a rookie head coach, I think what he is going to be quite good at is managing the personalities of the team. And I think there's a certain sort of similarity between, you know, if you watch The Last Dance, right? And they would just sort of, those teams would just let Dennis Rodman just go off and be Dennis Rodman for a bit. You know what I mean? He just, obviously they're very two different blokes, but I think they had that same mentality where it's I just need to go and have some Kyrie time or whatever it is. And he's not going to strip clubs and, you know, partying with Carmen Electra. But I think Kyrie's just obviously a sensitive soul, which is cool. And he's just, you know, got to find that time, and he's just got to be himself. And I think what is going to endear Steve Nash to Kyrie is where Steve Nash is going to be like, look, to the media, he's going to say, Kyrie said it's personal. And it's personal. Like, you know, there's as much as you want to say, you know, he's getting paid $40 million to play and he should just turn up and all this kind of stuff. Being well paid doesn't preclude you from mental health issues and, you know, and having to look after yourself and things like that. So I think that's quite a nice thing that Steve Nash is going to do to kind of sort of foster that relationship with Kyrie and kind of have his back in front of the media in that regard. Well, that's the bad. That's the ugly that we're going to be looking back for the last little bit of the season. But now it's time to focus on the good. And where else to start but KD and Kyrie absolutely balling out. in Nets uniforms. It's been a long time coming to see KD. It's been a long time coming to see KD and Kyrie playing together. But it's been absolutely beautiful. KD's averaged 28 points, 4 assists, 7 rebounds. We touched on it before we broke up for Christmas, but KD is back, baby. And if he stays fit, then it's a very, very good sign for the Nets. Guys, what are your thoughts on KD's performance on the early going of the season?
Speechless. I mean, when it comes to KD, I mean, I still feel it's weird. I mean, we do this podcast and it still feels like an honor that we actually get to talk about this guy playing for our team. I mean, his comeback, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there was still like that slight worry in the back of my head that he's coming off such a severe injury that there was going to be a decrease in his standard, I guess. But I mean, coming back from one of the worst injuries to happen to a basketball player, if we end up going on, even if we don't win the championship, say we get to the finals, that has to go down as one of the best comebacks of all time. I mean, I know we're only 10 games or so into the season, but I was laughing. I was talking to some of my family and they were saying, it's like, oh, the podcast is so positive. You never really talk about kind of negatives, but since we started it, there's not really been too many negatives, to be honest with you, up until now. But yeah, like from pre-season onwards, I mean, KD's been so efficient. I mean, it's confidence. I mean, when you're coming back from an injury like that, you've got to think that your confidence is in the back of your mind. You've got to think that you're a wee bit hesitant to do certain things, but that's never happened for him. And it just shows his elite mentality. And yeah, just everything about him is been fantastic. And he just doesn't look like he's lost his step either. I think he just looks superb in all aspects of his game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been superb. And I mean, I think you could probably even say he's still not quite there yet. And that's not saying that he's decreased, because he certainly hasn't. You can see he's just kind of building himself up ever so slightly, game by game. So we've not seen him for a few games now. But yeah, KD, there is no doubt about it in my mind that he is back and he is going to be so key for us. He's got the team high 28.2 points per game on average. And Kyrie, to be fair to him, isn't far behind, and fair play for keeping up with KD, because I certainly wouldn't fancy it. I mean, yeah, I don't really think we can say we're all that surprised to have seen both KD and Kyrie ball out. Of course, there has been some moments where they've maybe not played how we'd expect them to, but there has been some fine moments. Obviously, Kyrie, I think that perhaps a standout moment between the pair of them was Kyrie's 17-point fourth quarter in that mental win over the Hawks, the 145-141 win, where we said there was no defense and that earlier on, but really we mean that there was none in this game, and that was for both teams. We didn't defend, they didn't defend, and yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic game to watch, even though it was a real nail biter right up until the kind of very end. But without Kyrie doing that kind of fourth quarter heroics, we wouldn't have won that. And I mean, I think we're going to see more of that from either him or KD throughout the season.
Yeah, the thing that gets me about Kyrie is just how efficient he's been with usage at such high volume and high scoring. I've got it here. He's got 27 points, as you say, just behind KD, still dishing 6 assists and 5 rebounds. But the efficiency to go along with that volume and production is crazy. It's just, you kind of, and this carries on from last season as well. Yeah, so he only had 20 games, but he was averaging 27 on ridiculous efficiency. But now he's sort of continued that into this new season. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my years as a Nets fan. It's just like, we don't get nice things. Stuff, the bottom's going to fall out of this at some stage. We don't, this doesn't feel right. But maybe it's not a fluke, and maybe Kyrie is just that efficient and that good. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see him go forward into this season and hopefully carry that on. But another man that caught my eye was a walking double-double, averaging 11 and 11. Rudy Gobert's had Rudy Gobert in his pocket, and the difference between how much those two players earn and the play on that game against Utah. My daughter's favorite player now, which is a revelation for a 2-year-old. But Jarrett Allen has been an absolute freak of nature. What have you guys made of GAA?
I mean, I think it's fair to say we're going to cost ourselves a lot of money by not signing him to an extension sooner. I mean, the Gobert contract happened, and that was an absolutely massive contract that is without doubt going to impact the kind of money that centres are going to get for the next few years at least. And I mean, we could have probably signed Jarrett to a pretty reasonable deal a few weeks ago when we were eligible to do so, but then obviously we didn't, and he started the season in fine form. And yeah, I think it's going to cost us a fair bit, and I can't help but worry that maybe we've priced ourselves out, because if another team comes in, I don't know if we'll maybe even be able to afford him. I know there was quite a lot of talk about maybe Spencer needing to decline the player option so we could have that extra bit of cash to I'm saying throw at Jarrett Allen like it's a bad thing, but yeah, it's a really kind of tough one and a tough situation we find ourselves in. And we can only hope that maybe the opposition teams who are surely going to send some offer sheets his way don't go too crazy, don't do a 50 million Tyler Johnson style deal. And yeah, we managed to get him on a decent amount, because I think Jarrett Allen could be our centre for the next 10 years quite easily. He is that good. And I mean, as you say, Matt, a walking double-double, and that game against Gobert really, to me anyway, signified the leap in quality he's made. I think a lot of us had all said we really need to see him make that leap in quality. And for me, that was a sure sign that he's done that. And I mean, against Joel Embiid, another top centre in the league, he more than held his own and done really well again. So I think Jarrett Allen has been absolutely superb. And there has been one thing that I think I could see as a negative, but I mean, I guess it's never really been his thing, and that's shooting. I noticed it more probably in the Grizzlies game last night than in other games, but there seemed to be so many times where he kind of found himself completely empty in the mid-range. Obviously, everyone's going for the shooters and the scoring threats. He's a paint player, but you just think if he could develop a mid-range shot, he would be absolutely lethal and would be worth every penny, and worth more than we'd probably pay him now, just based on his kind of current status as a player.
Yeah, just to quickly follow on from what you were saying, Cammy, about his shooting there. I mean, I know what you mean. There was the moments where he was kind of left at the free throw line and no one was guarding him at all, and you just think, mate, you're actually decent at shooting free throws. You've got to think that you can nail a few shots from there, and I think you will start to take them. But yeah, I mean, I'm willing to admit that I was certainly wrong to start the season. I think I definitely wasn't expecting this type of leap from Jarrett Allen. But I think that was naive for me to think that, because you have to think that we drafted this guy when he was 18, a 6'11", 18-year-old who we didn't expect to see in the league immediately, but straight away he was an impact for the Nets, and he was going to take that jump eventually, and I think he's taken it this season. It's not just the standard of his performances that he's had so far; it's the confidence. I mean, as you said, Cammy, it's that game against Gobert. I've found in the past couple of seasons that he doesn't look nervous as such. He didn't look nervous as such in like previous seasons, but he almost looked like he knew that he was up against someone who is a great centre, like Gobert's, Embiid's, and he knew he was in for a challenge. He just looked like that sometimes. He can sometimes get caught out a bit, but he looks so confident now, and he just thinks, he looked, even the way he was kind of in the post-match interview the other day, he was just saying, he was like, yeah, I want to be the best at my game. I want to perfect this craft, and I love that from him. And I would definitely pop him in the top 15 centres in the league at the moment. It's so funny the way that people talk about how the old-fashioned centre positions finished now, with so many centres shooting the three, but we get dominated by so many centres. So how can we say that? I mean, you look at guys like Gobert, even last night, Valanciunas, until he got told that he needed to self-isolate, he was destroying us. And I think Allen can be that guy for us, where teams fear putting out smaller guys at centre or power forward because he's just going to eat in the paint. And yeah, I think you're spot on, Cammy, in saying that. I think he can dominate for the next 10 years for the Nets. I've got hope that, just down to the market and the specific kind of free agents that are out there, that he may not get as big a contract than you may think, just because there's not a huge amount of money out there, and we may get him in a nice contract, but teams would be stupid not to be looking at him as a restricted free agent. And it wouldn't even surprise me if the Nets didn't extend him. I don't know why. It just seems to be that type of thing with obviously like Bogdanovic not getting matched this season. I just worry that they wouldn't match the contract that he gets given, but I hope they do, because yeah, I think he's been absolutely outstanding so far.
Yeah, I think for JA, it's always been a matter of consistency. But I think he's really. I think it's ever. I remember watching an interview with him when I think it was as DeAndre signed, and someone asked him the question, "Do you want to start?" And he was like, "Yes." And I think there was just something very definite and very like, you can see like a very media trained answer coming back being like, I'll do whatever the coach says and I'm here for the best of the team. And if I need to come off the bench, then I will. But no, he's like, even though he's just a meek, very mild mannered, really nice lad, he's very much like, no, I'm going to play because I want to play because I'm really good at basketball. So he's got that level of confidence. And I think where everyone's kind of keeping saying that he's not very strong to sort of come up against those Joel Embiids. I don't think they've been watching very much Nets basketball because he has put on weight over the last 4 years. He is getting stronger, but I think the thing that's really, really come across has been his footwork. And I think he can just kind of get to his position where he needs to kind of, just have like a little hook shot in or a little finger roll in from his back to the basket and kind of beat that other big man sort of quite quickly off that first step. And I think, that's just an underrated aspect of his game. But yeah, I really, really hope he does stay in a Nets uniform. But yeah, I agree that he's going to have people queuing up. Anyone that can afford to go for him will be going for him. So what do you think? What do you think his ceiling is for sort of top X center in the league?
I think it's difficult because obviously there's so many good young centers out there, like to kind of say in say 5-10 years where he will be in the ranking. I mean, with obviously Bam Adebayo, DeAndre Ayton, there's so many good young centers out there. But in terms of his efficiency in the fourth quarter and how he can impact games, there's like a stat out there that's mad. I think he's in like the top 5 players that are like clutching in the fourth quarter over the last couple of seasons, up with kind of Kyrie and Spencer Dinwiddie. So I think he actually has kind of more of an impact on games than some of these centers like DeAndre Ayton, where he puts up good numbers, but they've never really came into kind of game-winning moments. And yeah, I think personally he could probably sneak into like the top 5 best centers in the NBA at some point in his career. And I think he'd be absolutely delighted if he could do that.
I think I'll go with the same. I think, as Aidan says, you're going to be delighted if you make the top 5, but I think making it into the top 10 is a more than realistic goal to achieve, and to be considered one of the top 10 players in that position in the basketball world, I think that would be huge. And I mean, I'd take that all day long, certainly. And yeah, as Aidan says, lots of good young ones and some more experienced ones like your Goberts who have already spoken about. So to be in amongst the kind of them, Jarrett Allen wasn't, I mean, he was a mid first round pick, maybe just a little bit after. He wasn't kind of tipped for this big, huge career, but he's quietly kind of made a wee name for himself, and it's quite a good wee story. And I think he definitely has what it takes to break that top 10.
That's it. Yeah, I agree. Jarrett Allen, top 10 center in the league. You heard it here first. It will happen sooner rather than later. Well, gents, that's our end of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Unless there were any other good bits that you wanted to flag before we move on to some predictions for next week. Sorry.
I do have a few. I've got some stats that I noticed. We've got the 6th best offensive rating in the league of 113.1. Now, this surprised me quite a bit considering we're 5-5. You'd think with a kind of sitting 6th like that, we'd be a lot higher up. But yeah, I mean, that's not too shabby. And then, especially considering we've been a team without stars as well for a few games. And then we're also 3rd for highest points per game on average with 118.8, which again makes you think, how can't we have won more than 5 games? And yeah, it just goes to show that you really cannot predict what's going to happen, especially in a season like this one.
Yeah, I just want to add, because I probably should have mentioned it earlier when we were talking about KD and Kyrie. How good has Kyrie Irving been on defence recently? I think it's gone under the radar just because the Nets haven't been great in the defensive end overall. But I just think he has been superb. Some of the steals and some of his positioning has been excellent, and I don't think it can go, because Kyrie has taken a slating on the defensive end throughout his career, and I think he's been superb this year, and that's what you want from our team leader right there. And I hope it starts to fall through the rest of the players, that is the desire and the effort that needs to be put in if you want to win a championship. obviously Kyrie's done it, KD's done it, and we need these guys to start getting the right habits through the rest of the team defensively so that we can go on and win it all.
Yeah, there's definitely lots to be thankful for and lots to be happy about as Nets fans, even though, if you flick on Twitter after a loss, then you might be forgiven for thinking that we might as well just quit the rest of the season and sack it all off. But looking ahead to next season, we are back to a weekly podcast now. So before we pod again, the Nets will have played 4 games. So as we did last time out, we're going to try and predict our record for the next 4 games. So on Sunday, the Nets will play Oklahoma City before going on Tuesday to host Denver. Then the following day, we're going to travel to Madison Square Garden to take on the hugely in form and world-beaten New York Knicks. And after that, we got a little bit of a layoff before Saturday, we host the Orlando Magic. So, gents, that's 4 games. What do you think our record is going to be after those 4 games, or what of those 4 games?
Yeah, I'd say 3-1. 3-1. I think should be our target. I mean, hoping all goes to plan. KD comes back for OKC. I hope to see Kyrie back. It'd be great to see him back on Sunday as well, if possible, and then the rest of the games. But if everything goes to plan, 3-1 would be okay. I think if you asked me at the start of the season, I'd probably said 4-0. But at the moment, I take 3-1.
I mean, yeah, I think I'd like to say 3-1, but given the way we have started the season, I think I'll temper my expectations a bit and say 2-2. I'm going to give us wins against the Thunder and the Knicks. Obviously, the Knicks, as we've already said, doing really well, but you've got to be winning games like that. And I've just kind of got this nice wee fascination in my head of Kyrie and KD coming back, absolutely balling out, and kind of like as a real New York is ours kind of statement performance. Then I reckon we'll probably lose to the Nuggets. They've not done really well, but I mean, they've got Nikola Jokic, who is absolutely incredible. I think he's averaging like 30 plus points, and that's for a centre, and he's got tons of assists, and yeah, he's just a great all-round player. And yeah, probably lose to the Magic as well. I think, as I said, the way we've started, we'll lose one of them, and I'd rather say we lose to the Magic than lose to the Knicks.
Yeah, I think I'm worried now. So I want to go mega optimistic, right? But I think I'm just too realistic. So I'm going to say 2-2 as well. I don't want to say it, but I think we slip up. I think the New York derby might be going the wrong way, just because that's just always what's happened. Like, it's just written. Just in terms of like a soap opera, I think the Knicks always seem to get up when they play the Nets. So I think that's what it's going to be. And I think Denver, I think, are going to take us as well. So I'm going to go 2-2 over those 2 as well. So
I think as well with the next game, it's one of those things with the way Tom Thibodeau's playing them. He's playing like Barrett and he's playing Randall for like 40 minutes a game, like something crazy like that. No wonder they're averaging such good stats. But you've got to think with the way Nash works his rotations at the moment as well, where he sometimes leaves the starters on the bench till really late in the fourth. Someone like Julius Randle can go off in those minutes, and I hope he kind of manages to alter his rotations to make sure that we can stop like guys like Randall. I'd hate to see someone like him like scoring like 30 and 15 against the Nets. It would just be totally demoralising, but he can come out and do that on any given night as well.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. Time will tell. But that'll do us. Thanks for joining us for another episode of BK to UK. Make sure you subscribe to us absolutely everywhere, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.